it's Leandra with New Vocations Racehorse Adoption Program, and today for our Trainer Tip Tuesday, I have Resiliency, whose farm name is Bounce, here with me again to demonstrate the tip for this week, which is going to be about checking in with your horse. So obviously humans and horses, we communicate a little differently. Humans are very verbal and horses are very non-verbal for the most part. And so when you're trying to check in with them to see how they're feeling, see if there's anything that might be bothering them, it's a little bit harder to just say, hey, Bounce, how are you feeling? So one of the ways that we can do that, obviously if you think there's a real problem, always good to go to your vet, but sometimes just like people, say you go to the gym and you're trying to get in shape and you can just be a little sore, you can have knots and just spots that are just not feeling great. And to check in with your horse, we need to pay attention to their muscles. Just like you might have somebody look at your bone and muscles and the whole picture with a chiropractor that focuses very much on the skeletal aspects, but it's pretty easy if you know what you're looking for to check in with your horse by tracing over their body. And so I'm going to show you a method that I learned from what's called the Masterson method, which is just one of the many different styles of body work, which focuses on a very non-invasive method of getting their energy flowing. And some people think you can think of this as getting stock chi flowing, but it really, there is a lot of good, productive resolution that can be had, and either way, no matter how you use it, it's non-invasive. You can't hurt your horse doing it if you're doing it right, and it can just help you check in and even just provide information to other horse service providers like your vet or chiropractor, acupuncturist, all that sort of thing, but it'll help you just to communicate with your horse better and be more in tune with things that might be bothering them. So I'm going to show you really quickly how you can sort of do a brief checking in by tracing what we call their bladder meridian line, and that runs about 1 inch off of either side of their vertebrae. So we'll start behind the ears. It's going to go down their whole vertebrae. Then it'll trace down this. You oftentimes can see a little groove here that we call a poverty groove. So we're going to trace back behind that, and it'll trace all the way down to this quarter mark, their hook. So imagine this big communication channel with your horse. And so you can start it by the ears. You want to use a really soft touch, so softer than what would break a yolk of an egg. So really soft. You don't want to use the points of your fingers, just the softer parts. And it's good for them to have as few distractions as possible. So if they're eating, they're not going to be giving you a good feedback. So try to either put them in cross-sides if they're comfortable like that. You can tie them or throw the lead over their neck. But you'll start up here, and what we're going to be paying attention to is the feedback that he's going to give us. And you'll see that from a rapid blinking of the eye, or a twitching in the muzzle that hopefully will turn into yawning, licking, chewing, and those will be indicators for us that he is releasing and he's starting to relax. So he's already pretty comfortable, and so you'll run your hand down pretty slowly, and hopefully right away you'll see some changes. So he's clearly open to this because he started to relax. You see his eye blinking up slower. You see his muzzle starting to do some things. So you find a spot where they seem sort of active or they're being stimulated by the touch, that you're just going to stay there and kind of wait and see if they're ready to release. And even if you want to continue going down, you can remember the spots where they're having difficulty. You can always go back to them later. This is not a one and done sort of thing. You can spend as much or as little time as you want, basically, but you want to make sure you're not going too fast because you can miss the cues, especially if you have a horse who's not used to doing body work, because they can be guarded. And for horses or any sort of herd animal, a lot of times they want to guard themselves from showing when they have a weak or a sore point, because they don't want to be seen as a weak member in their herd. So sometimes it'll take some time for a horse to just open up and start releasing, have obvious releases. But when they realize it feels good to release, a lot of times you'll find that they start to release faster, and you can just barely get your hands on them and they start chewing, licking, yawning, then they're much more open to the release. So again, bladder meridian line goes 1 inch on either side of the vertebrae. I'm going to sort of accelerate showing you this because, like I said, you could spend as much or as little time on this. You could spend hours just going over the bladder meridian line. And either way, we're hoping that this just starts the process of getting him to release. But what I noticed when I was running my hands down on his back, and also through what we've seen when we started to work with him under saddle, you can take a more isolated approach. For example, we noticed he was really stiff through his back. So if I trace my hands down along his back, I'm not sure if you can see that, but there's a little rippling, almost like a muscle spasm right here, you can see. And that's when I'm using the sharp edge of my finger. So if I go back through here, I can run my hand softly. So we're taking an isolated approach, tracing that bladder meridian line, checking in with him. And then I can be looking at his eye. We can slowly get through there. You can see he sort of became alert all of a sudden, as if to say to us, "Oop, that might be a spot." And so I'm just going to go slowly here. You can see his blinking start to slow, almost like they're getting drunk. It's sort of like an endorphin release. He looks like he's getting tired. So I'll just stay here for a second. You can see he starts to chew his mouth. He starts to drop his head a little lower. He's swished his tail. He's feeling things come up. So I can stick around here and wait for him to release. Or if you're not doing an isolated sort of inspection, see, he's wondering what's going on. Sometimes it can make them feel a little weird. It's not unusual also if you're doing this, if you find a spot that might be bothering them, sometimes your hand will feel like it's getting warm, which sounds bizarre, but I promise you if you start doing this and checking in with your horse, you'll become very in tune with things they're feeling. So if he's now relaxed his hip, that's great. It means he's sort of open to the release. I could slowly go past the point where I started to see him having a reaction. And if I'm not sure that I saw maybe a blink, or if he's just chewing, maybe he's just chewing. So I can go back and try running back again and see if it's replicable. So I start to see some rapid blinking. So I might hang around here for a little while. See if we start to get him to show other signs of release. And it can be just really slight releases at first. Again, it can take a while for a horse to get used to. Oh, we've got some more licking. There was a swallow there. But it can take a horse a while to get used to just releasing. But you can see he has this sort of hard thinking face. Like he's looking at me, he's trying to figure out what's going on. So you can practice this, check in with your horse, see if there are points where they start to change their behavior, they start to relax, they start to tense up, and you can revisit it and check in with your horse that way. And then as you move along, so maybe we go along towards that side, we see him blinking a lot more. He had some hard blinks like that. So maybe we hang around here. And you can revisit that spot and see if it's replicable. And then you can continue on, tracing that bladder meridian line, so about an inch on either side of the vertebrae. You might start fidgeting. It's very normal for a horse to walk around or fidget. Again, they might just feel like things are starting to move around, kind of like if you imagine chi being stuck and now it's shaken up, they might feel kind of weird. And then if not, you can continue on, tracing by their buttock region, go on either side of the tail, down towards and past the poverty groove, which is this ridge back here, down by their paw. And tracing along, all the way down to the corner mark, down here. So that's an example. Bounce here is a little reserved, but we started to see some action from him. If I spent a lot more time on this, then we'd start to see a lot more releases, hopefully. But you can always check in with your horse and see if there are any points where he really gets agitated when you're running over, they become really concerned, they're blinking a lot, or it seems like they want to release. Sometimes it's almost like they're itching to release a spot. And that's just a good practice for you to be able to check in with your horse, see if there are any points that they need extra attention for, and if obviously if you feel like you're qualified to help them release those spots or they need a little additional help, definitely contact your vet or other professionals to help you along that. But that's what we've got for today. Thank you so much for joining us today for our trainer tip. This is Resiliency, whose name around the barn is Bounce, and he is in the process of becoming available for adoption, so definitely keep on the lookout for more from him. That's a nice release too. So thank you so much again for joining us, and please join us again next Tuesday for our Trainer Tip Tuesday.